We really understand our clients' businesses. I think when we got our first managed service built, finished, there's a client on it using it. It was unbelievably gratifying. And that's like, we've been able to do stuff in like a morning that would have taken us a year. In a big traditional practice. The methodology we've created, and we've done some testing of this already, it's great for a human. It's even better for Gen AI. We effectively have the perfect knowledge that you can just stitch together, throw it into a Gen AI model, and it comes up with a great answer.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Bridges. Chris started his legal career as a tech lawyer at a top 30 UK firm, helping regulated firms procure IT services. He is the co-founder and COO of Tacit Legal, a boutique tech and media firm that doesn't believe in applying the traditional legal services model at every problem. Chris has a wealth of experience in software development, law firm finance, and organizational change. Described as a rising star by Legal 500, Chris now spends most of his time running Tacit Legal's managed services business, developing the technology and knowledge that underpins it. So, a very big warm welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you on the show. And I know we go quite a way back with our respective journeys, but today's all about you. And before we get into you, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
I'm going to go for something under half, like a 4 maybe.
A 4. Okay. And have you ever watched an episode?
I have, yeah. I've never made it all the way through. I think I got to the point where Mike got kicked out and then lost the will. But
lost the will. Yeah. 4 justified, given that story and segment. All right. Well, let's get into everything about you, Chris. Would you mind by kicking us off, tell us a bit about your background and career journey?
Yeah, sure. So I guess by training, I'm a kind of commercial tech data protection lawyer. So I've spent most of my practical life kind of negotiating contracts for kind of enterprise customers, helping them procure things. So I qualified maybe, well, I'm not even sure now, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. And then I got bored quite quickly, I think that's probably fair to say. And I just decided I needed to do something else and kind of branch out. So I ended up going through a series of roles at my old firm. So it was a big kind of national firm. Went into finance for a bit, went into change for a bit, and then eventually decided, hell, I'm going to go and do this on my own. So we ended up setting up with 3 of my other partners there, and we're 2.5 years in.
Yeah, and as a friend of mine who runs his own podcast says, screw it, just do it. And I think that's a great example of that. But there's a bit to unpack there. So let's go back to maybe a bit more towards the beginning, the start of your legal career. Obviously, you're at a national law firm, you say you're doing some commercial tech work. But what inspired you to pursue a career in law all the way back when?
Yeah, so I think I always struggle with this one because I always never quite remember, and I always think you have a very different view later on.
Yeah.
I think part of it was that and obviously I didn't say this at my training contract interviews. I think part of it was I just didn't know what to do. And it was a good degree, make dad proud sort of degree.
Yeah.
Did the degree, found it academically really interesting in the end, so it was a good choice. And then it just kind of naturally flew from there. So it's really not the the origin story.
No, but it's authentic, isn't it? And that's at the end of the day, it's a solid choice. And look where you are now. We'll get into the present shortly, but let's kind of go back then. So you sort of fell into the law in many respects, we could say, but in a positive way. And obviously you did very well. Got to a national firm, and you're doing some tech work. What type of work were you involved in as the sort of tech lawyer? And are there any interesting cases you worked on at the early stage of your career that you can share with us at all?
Yeah, so I think and again, I think this probably goes back to what I should have done in the first place. I found myself falling into tech pretty quickly. And I guess I just really enjoyed the more technical, as in non-legal technical aspect of it.
Yeah.
Most of my time was spent kind of with IT people talking about IT, not talking about law.
Yeah.
So I almost felt like an IT person that happened to know about law. rather than the other way around. So it was a lot of time kind of with IT people figuring out, what are the risks they actually care about, rather than kind of the indemnities and the liabilities and all of those kind of things. So yeah, it was a lot of kind of hands-on, really getting to understand what people were buying or what they were trying to achieve with the big change project they were working on or whatever. And then really getting into the more like practical risks and making sure that their contracts actually dealt with those more practical risks.
Yeah, yeah. Practically speaking,
Yeah.
on the Legally Speaking podcast. All right, let's talk about, because I would describe you as a very modern lawyer. Absolutely providing the services to the clients the way it should be, and very much why your firm is doing so well. But when did you realise traditional legal practice wasn't really for you, and if so, why?
Yeah, I think I had the niggle pretty early on. I think maybe a year or so in post qualified,
Yeah,
and I was just starting to feel like I'm not sure where this is going. It was no longer, oh, I definitely want to be a partner in 10 years. I was starting to think, oh, actually, do I want to go in a different direction at some point? But I don't think I actually did anything about it for another year or two.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, like as I said earlier, I was starting to get a bit bored. It wasn't really challenging me in the way I wanted it to be. And I think that is one of those things at the time I didn't realize it with a lot of looking back on it. I think one of the things I never realized when I was younger is that I'm actually quite creative.
yeah,
I was never artsy, so I always thought, oh, I'm not creative. Um, but actually being a lawyer, it is quite a creative job in a lot of ways, but you don't really get to own something and make it and fix it in the same way that, at least as a private practice lawyer, as you do kind of as a entrepreneur or what have you. So yeah, I think that looking back on it, that's kind of what was causing the doubt.
yeah.
Um,
And I see a lot of that. So obviously, you and I, have known each other for a long time, but also from sort of really leaning into this sort of legal content and community side of things, obviously with the podcast and extension of that. I've worked with so many lawyers that are creative, that actually traditional law firms are suppressing that, ability for them to bring out that creative side, which I think would be so powerful for law firms. But let's stick with your firm, because I really admire your approach to hiring and running of the firm, because you're supportive of the alternative career path. So what made you transition out of big law to start a boutique specifically, and why are you so supportive of that sort of alternative career path?
yeah, so I've always been a big, if I guess part of the problem with a lot of firms is they expect everyone to be everything.
Yeah,
So it's not going to surprise anyone when I say, as a private practice lawyer, you're expected to be a good lawyer, you're expected to be a good people manager, you're expected to be a good account manager, you're expected to be a good outbound salesperson. And I just, no one is that good at everything. Um, and I guess the career track in a traditional firm is heavily weighted towards sales.
yeah,
And the people who are making the most money and are seen as like the most successful partners are the ones with the biggest client book.
yeah,
Um, and I just don't think that's like a sustainable reward mechanism going forward, and especially. I think that's probably become particularly true in the last couple of years with Gen AI and whatnot, and people are really more than ever starting to see that law is going to change, and those skills, like you've got to reward
yeah.
people in the same way and value sales the same as you value, someone who's a tech wizard or what have you.
It's so true, isn't it? Because these are all multi skills that add to the overall thing that you're offering, and keeping clients happy and all of that good stuff. Okay, well, let's talk about life as a sort of co-founder and COO of your own firm. A law firm founded to help organizations maximize their team's capabilities, enabling them to achieve more with less. Like it. So, can you share us more
Who
about
wrote that?
Can you share more with us about your firm's mission and how are you going about achieving it?
Yeah, sure. So we set up to be basically laser focused on what we do best, which is commercial tech and media.
Yep.
So we don't do anything else. That's all we do. Um, and then we, right from the start, we've kind of seen it in with two lenses, I guess. First lens is, we completely acknowledge that the traditional way, where it's fairly bespoke, fairly expensive, is the right way sometimes, and a lot of the time, if it's a massive risky project, you do want lawyers poring all over it and picking out every detail. So we completely acknowledge that. So we've kind of built that in, but we're just doing it in a much slicker, leaner way. So it's still cheaper, more cost effective, but we do still do that. And it's the same kind of experience you'd expect from kind of any city lawyer.
Yep.
And then the other half is what we're calling our managed service business, which is more about saying, right, that traditional model is great in certain circumstances, but let's not throw it at everything. And it's about finding kind of pain points that are coming up enough for us to go, right, we can really think about a completely different way of providing the service, take it right back to basics, use tech, use process, whatever is right. Sometimes it is people. Actually, a lot of the time it is people, and just making sure they've got the right knowledge and tools and what have you. But yeah, just taking it right back to basics and saying, right, here is a repeatable product, effectively, that we can sell time and time again, and all of our clients benefit from that kind of standardization and just taking things right back to basics.
Yeah, and it's smart, and sometimes they say, it's better to be clear than it is to be clever, in terms of being, taking things back to simplification form and being able then to execute really, really well, and getting those details sorted. Where did the name come from? And how did you find setting up with co-founders as well? And any advice for people that might be sat in a law firm, maybe as a mid-level associate, junior associate, or senior, and thinking, actually, I want to go and do this myself, and maybe I need to do it with some other people?
Yeah, sure. So actually, Tacit was not the original name. So we did start as
Okay.
Britech Law, and that was very boring. It was because we're technology lawyers and we're near Brighton. So,
Makes sense.
but it was never really meant to be, and we always knew it, I think. But it
Yeah.
was just, company's house. We need to get a LLP set up. Britech Law. Let's go
Yeah.
for it. So I think we changed it about 3 months in. So Tacit Legal is kind of picking into the fact that we're all a bit geeky, and we all, especially, like, we really understand our clients' businesses.
Yeah.
Like, two of us are former IT people. Aurelia, one of my other partners, is a media lawyer, and she's worked in house, and it's, we just tacitly understand your business effectively. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. And so when you mentioned obviously already there, co-founders, how have you found that? And would you encourage others to think about going in that direction? Yeah, just tell us a bit about that experience.
Yeah, I think I would do it again for sure.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. It
Yeah.
completely is not for everyone. Um, I have really enjoyed it. The highs are, the agility. If something's not working, just being able to do something new
Yeah.
tomorrow. We don't kind of entrench ourselves in a 3-year plan or annual plan. So that's great, and if you love that, then that kind of environment's great for you. And I think the second thing I've absolutely loved is really, I think I'm just trying to put it into words without being rude. It's the speed of getting stuff done as well. So not only being able to change direction quickly, but, like, put it this way, we've been able to do stuff in like a morning that would have taken us a year
Yeah.
in a big traditional practice. And that's like, in a big traditional practice defense, it's a much more complicated business. There's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, just being kind of unleashed to be able to do that and do
Yeah.
it so quickly is amazing.
I always say boutique is beautiful, and you think of these larger organizations like oil tankers, it takes them forever to turn around. Whereas you
Yeah,
can almost be like that speedboat. You can pivot, and I think you need to be able to, be able to make smart decisions, not have as much red tape, not have as much bureaucracy, and actually get to the heart of like making a decision, because things are changing, and like this AI first world we're going to be continuing to live in. Speed of change is almost going to be the norm, not sort of
yeah,
we need to make 6 months, we need to think about this. Like you don't have that time, you don't have that luxury. So yeah, absolutely, I can see why small to mid-sized law firms are going to continue to flourish, because you can make those decisions a lot quicker, and obviously meet clients where they're at. Okay, let's talk about your role as a COO, because it allows you to take the lead on technology finance and develop Tacit Legal's managed service offerings, which you touched on. So would you mind explaining more about that role in detail, and maybe what a typical day looks like for you as a co-founder of a COO?
yeah, sure. Um, there's a kind of an origin story here, which kind of is like the whole purpose of being of the firm. But the my last role at my previous firm was leading on the kind of capability work stream of our target operating model program. So it was, again, there's a theme coming up here, stripping things right back to basics.
Yeah,
If you were to rebuild the firm today, how would you build it in terms of, how would you structure people? What technology would you use? What process? What data do you need? All of that kind of stuff. Um, so I kind of, that was immediately before we started Tacit. So we kind of came into Tacit in that mind frame, and actually ended up implementing a lot of the stuff that came out of that. But really, so I think the first year of my Tacit journey was really operational. It was like very, very heavy, 100% almost.
yeah,
Just like looking at everything, how are we onboarding clients? Is the friction that we can take out? It's a really easy way of doing it. How are we pricing matters consistently? All of that stuff, and just putting in place all of the stuff that we need to do it quickly and consistently. So that was the kind of first year, which was really like getting the foundations right.
yeah,
And then the second year was like, right, great, foundations are built. Now let's start building the cool stuff.
yeah,
So yeah, from about probably about this time last year, really, maybe a bit before, I've kind of switched fully into product mode, which is effectively going, right, what solutions are we building? How do we build them?
yeah,
I am a developer myself, so getting hands on, getting my hands dirty,
yeah,
developing software at times with some help as well, obviously. But yeah, so it's complete mixed bag, and it's a lot of finance. Looking after the day-to-day finances. We try wherever possible to either do it ourselves or outsource it, rather than kind of hire like a practice manager or an office manager. And the longer we can do that, I think it trains you well. I think is a nice thing, nice way to put it. If you don't have someone around who can take that stuff off you, then you figure out how to do it yourself, and by doing that, you figure out the best way to do it. And yeah, it's been quite a good thing. So yeah, it's kind of been jack of all trades, really. Everything no one else wants to do.
Well, and then it's when you move into doing something new and starting something new, it is a little bit scrappy, and
Yeah,
you kind of do need to take on a few different hats, and obviously as you evolve, you'll either invest in tech, it'll be AI agents or things like that, or people, to sort of take on roles. But I remember a mentor said very early to me, I think I say this a lot on the show, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And as a responsible firm owner, you have to take that on. You have to take it on and
yeah,
find a solution, because the other alternative isn't the direction you want to go. You want to keep going forwards, growing the firm, and all of that good stuff. But let's stick on challenges, because we do really respect and enjoy hearing people's challenges and how they've overcome them. So from you, speaking very candidly, Chris, what have been the hardest challenges running a small and lean firm?
yeah. So I think everything is just multiplied when you're small.
Yeah,
The highs are really high, the lows are really low. Everything is just more.
yeah,
So I think that for us, this was kind of a problem we created for ourselves deliberately. But we're completely self-funded. We haven't put loads of capital in. We don't have any bank loans. So we do run it super lean. Like, we don't have loads of kind of cash sitting behind us.
yeah,
But what we need to do that is to be billing stuff, weekly, collecting invoices ridiculously quickly, and getting out of old habits.
Yeah.
And anyone who's been in a big firm, the old habits is always, month-end billing. 9 times out of 10, you've got a accounts receivable team that's then going off and collecting the invoices for you. So it's the hardest thing, I think, has just been practicing new behaviors
Yeah.
and doing them until they stick. And there's definitely like a 3-month cycle until they do stick. So everyone does really well, then they kind of go back to their old ways, and you're like, guys, we need to do everything better. And then so it's that it is quite tough on everyone.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio, hosts of the annual Clio Cloud Conference. Better known as ClioCon, it's the biggest conference in legal and an opportunity that every legal professional should take advantage of. This year, ClioCon is headed to the iconic city of Boston, Massachusetts on October the 16th and 17th. A city steeped in legal history and renowned for its culture of innovation, Boston is the perfect setting for this incredible event. And right now is the perfect time to buy your passes before prices go up at the end of February. Join thousands of legal professionals, thought leaders, and industry experts to network, uncover the latest legal trends, gain groundbreaking insights, and learn practical strategies to elevate your practice. Whether it's mastering marketing techniques, streamlining your workflows, or enhancing client relationships, ClioCon offers actionable insights that make a real difference. Past prices will never be this low again, so act now. Visit ClioCloudConference.com to secure your pass today. Now back to the show. Change is hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that. But I learned this from Jack Newton at one of the ClioCon huge cloud conference event they have in America every year. And he talked a lot about how bad law firms have been traditionally at billing. And he talks a lot about the Thunberg gratitude curve, which I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's a concept that I think I may have mentioned this to our listeners before, but definitely worth looking at. That, law firms wait so late to invoice their clients, where actually you should be invoicing them when the peak of the relationship is the work you've done. That level of the relationship is so good that whether it's a will, whether it's a probate, whether it's an end of deal transaction, like that level of the relationship, if you've delivered the services and the client's super happy and they're really on board with it, then that level of gratitude on that curve is so high that invoice is going to get paid, in that period of time. Whereas as time goes on, like if you've bought your house, and you're invoicing 3 to 6 months later, you're not that bothered about the legal services that are done. It becomes like, oh, that's that fee I still need to pay. So there's really something in it for small businesses to look into that sort of Thunberg gratitude curve when it comes to billing. I think there's a real lean message in that.
And honestly, clients, we haven't had one client that hasn't liked it.
Yeah.
And I'd say 80% of clients have actually positively said that's a better experience.
Yeah.
They want to be billed as quickly as possible after it's done, so they still remember.
Yeah. And the energy is positive both sides at that stage, right? Because it's completely. You're happy, you'll know it's getting. And what I also like about your story is skin in the game. I love founders that put their own skin in the game because a lot of people, when they do it as first time founders, it has to work. Right,
yeah.
It has to work, and that grit, that tenacity will always pull you through. So, I love that you've gone into this entrepreneurial lane. You put your own skin in the game with your co-founders, and that's clearly why you're doing so well. And I remember a mentor said to me very early on as well, Rob, look, if you have 50 good days as an entrepreneur, you've had a fantastic year. Most of the time, it's pretty horrible, and you've got to have enough of a mission and passion to want to do it to get through it. But let's talk about some of the highs, because we've kind of dwelled on challenges, but it is fun, and having that sort of autonomy. So alongside these challenges, what have been some of the highlights for you of running your firm, and what have you enjoyed most?
Yeah, I think it is back to that, what we were talking about earlier on, the agility and the sense of control and being able to be a master of your own destiny. And it's really hard to pick out one thing because it's just been like that constantly. And every time there's been something we don't like, all of us or one of us or whatever, we look at it, we fix it, and we move on. And there's no kind of sitting around on gripes and things. So I mean that's the absolute best thing. It's the overall sense. But in terms of actual moments, I think when we got our first managed service built, finished, there's a client on it using it. It was unbelievably gratifying.
You always remember that first one, don't you? It's
Yeah,
like and also back to your point about, I love it. I was talking about removing friction, and like you're becoming running a friction-free firm, and like you say, being that agile, be able to do that, and kind of, you're harnessing your own sort of flywheel effect where you're putting all these inputs in, you're not having so much friction, having to go through all these layers, and you can continue to build momentum and go forward. Let's stick with managed services then. So, what makes your managed service business different from the rest?
yeah. So it is really that pick that we've touched on before already, which is the just well, actually, it depends what you're talking about. If it managed service compared to our bespoke service, it's that picking a one solution,
Yeah,
one problem, just coming up with a solution to that specific problem and doing it really well. Compared to other managed services businesses, I think it's probably more a timing thing than anything. But because we've built it in the last few years, we know what's coming down the pipeline
yeah,
in terms of Gen AI and what have you. So everything's been built in such a way that that journey to Gen AI for all or part of it is much, much easier.
yeah,
So everything is all about, data structures, what's actually sat behind like that user interface that you're using, and making sure that is ready for AI. So like we've got one, for instance, one of our first managed service is managed contract review service. And effectively the methodology we've created, and we've done some testing of this already. It's great for a human. It's even better for Gen AI.
yeah,
So we effectively have the perfect knowledge that you can just stitch together, throw it into a Gen AI model, and it comes up with a great answer. And yeah, because we've kind of had that in mind the whole time, it's just a lot slicker, and there's no technical debt or cultural debt because we've
yeah.
just done this better way from day one, and we don't have a lot of stuff to fix in order to get there, which is definitely at least partially a timing thing.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And I love that you're talking about AI. And obviously, we can't do podcasts now without talking about it. So, but I want to think this specifically on Gen AI, because commercial is thought to be one practice area that will be affected the most by generative AI. Do you think your firm is resilient to the impact of Gen AI, and in terms of what it'll have on commercial practice, perhaps over the next 10 years, which seems like a lifetime away in the world we're living at the moment?
Yeah. Yes, I think we're resilient. Is the super short, super short answer. Why? I, I think that study, I think it's a Deloitte study, I think,
Yeah,
or it was one of the big four, that said that is completely right. And I think there's a lot of other opinions. All of them agree it's all about timing. Is it in a year's time or is it in 10 years' time? And you've got Sam Altman saying, AGI is 6 months away. It's not. It's just not. You only have to have a few really bad AI experiences to be realized, like, okay, no, it's really not that smart. Um, I do think in 10 years, commercial lawyers are going to look very different to what they are now. I think at the moment, um, most of our clients, like, well, I would say it's like 50-50. Half of them do not want to use AI at all.
yeah,
Half of them do. Those that do really want to be using it on the stuff that wouldn't be reviewed anyway.
yeah,
It's not replacing what we're doing. In the very short term, it's not replacing what we're doing. It's more doing the stuff that we weren't doing anyway. Um, but I do think over the next 10 years, that's going to eat more and more into what we are doing.
yeah,
And we are super conscious of that, and that's why we've got this managed service business. So I think as much as anyone is resilient to AI, I think we're in a pretty good place, because we're thinking ahead and about how we kind of transition that way.
yeah,
But my opinion is in 5 years' time, things are still going to look pretty like they are today. But people will be using AI behind the scenes as a tool. And then as people become more and more confident, then they may just cut the lawyers out of the equation for more and more of that work.
yeah.
But but yeah, I do. Yeah, I think we're pretty resilient compared to most. in our industry.
Yeah, and it's you can be like you've said throughout, you can be nimble enough to be looking at things on a daily basis, and if things need to change, then if you need to tweak or adapt, then absolutely you're there and able to do it at sort of a good speed. The other thing that I think is really important is automation for law firms. So much repetitive work that is done time and time again, and I think firms that really pay attention to this are going to save themselves a lot of time, be a lot more efficient and productive. So at Tacit Legal, I understand you simplify and standardize your processes, technology, and services, and automate things that make sense to be automated. So, how do you go about automation at Tacit Legal?
Yeah, this is, I think, something that lawyers are, by their nature, very like, lawyers overgeneralizing. We like to overcomplicate things. We like to
Yeah.
cater for every scenario. There was actually at Legal Geek, I was in so this is a slight tangent, but it will make sense when I come around to it. In one of the breakout rooms, there was like a spicy takes on AI session. I don't know if you went to it. But someone said, "Oh, is anyone ever going to be happy with AI? Because the answer's not 100% right." And
Yeah.
I think it was Richard Tromans came back and was like, why do you think professional indemnity insurance exists? The whole industry is propped up on professional indemnity insurance, which by its nature means we get stuff wrong. But I think for lawyers to automate stuff meaningfully, we've got to get out of that.
Yeah.
Everything has to be perfect, and you cannot automate stuff unless you simplify it first.
Yeah.
And if you fail to take it back to basics, you're going to be going around in circles trying to, cater for every single edge case. So that is my number one tip. Simplify it first.
Yeah.
Simplify it first, then standardize it. Make sure that simplified process works for every edge case that you've got. And if it doesn't, just question whether you need those edge cases.
Yeah.
Because we've been through this a few times. Number one was we automated our quotes, how we generate our quotes. And we ended up with like 15 different options, and was like, do we actually need 15 options? Like,
Yeah.
if we offered 3 options to clients in terms of how they want to be billed, they would pick one, and one of them that would be perfectly acceptable for them. So it's just, I think when you realize that you do have loads of edge cases, before you actually go away and try and automate them all, just go, hang on, can we just consolidate this down?
Yeah.
Because it's when you automate stuff, it's also quite brittle. It breaks easier. So if you've got loads of edge cases, you're going to fail pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about just keeping it simple. There really is something for that, because if you confuse people, you also lose people. And I think the more simple you can make these processes to automate, obviously to remove all of the hard yards that years and years gone by people have done, but also the benefit, the net gains of people actually understanding what's happening, and then actually the adoption of these things or things actually happening is so much greater. Really like how you're running your business. Really like what's sort of happening at all things Tacit Legal. I guess as a sort of final question, what advice do you wish you had known before transitioning out of traditional practice to co-founding your own firm?
Ooh, this one's quite a personal one, but
Yeah.
I think for me, when you if you're on your own, you co-found, the sense of self-accountability is massive. And 9 times out of 10, that's a superpower.
Yeah.
1 time out of 10, it is not, and it eats you up inside. You feel, you can get into a habit of feeling incredibly guilty about, having a day off at the weekend. You've mountain to-do list that you're like, I need to get through it. If I'm not getting through it, I'm not making progress. So I've gone through a whole thing over the last 2 years about trying to tame that
Yeah.
self accountability and not make me go insane.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd kind of known that up front and done a bit of self help work to get myself ready for it, because it was a shock,
Yeah.
a
But
massive shock.
But I appreciate you sharing that. And, not to sound like the broken record, I mentioned this earlier because it is one of my favorite quotes. Self-accountability is so important when you have when you're verbose enough to set up your own business and, say, I'm going to make my own livelihood on me. I'm not going to need anything else and I'm going to go out there and do it. That does, you do carry that torch of self-accountability with it. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. But then to the second point, which is probably my favorite quote of all time, which I've said many times on here, is the magic you are looking for is in the work that you're avoiding. And sometimes you have to, get into those areas of work that you've been putting off or whatever it is and take that accountability. But balance is also important. And, you need to realize there's only one life and everything else. And, there's always going to be something else to do as your firm, grows. There's always going to be something else. So then sort of prioritization and things that are important to you. You need to just try and get that balance. Chris, this has been a wonderful conversation. Really enjoyed learning about your journey, the firm, all the great things you're doing. If our listeners want to follow more about your journey or they want to know more about Tacit Legal or indeed instruct your services, where can they find out more? Feel free to shout out any website, any social media handles. We'll also share them with a special episode for you too.
That's the one thing we're not good at social media. So we are on LinkedIn. We're very boring. We're lawyers and we're on LinkedIn. Tacit Legal on LinkedIn. Chris Bridges on LinkedIn for me personally. Our website's tacit.legal. That is a real domain name, I promise. My email, chris.bridges@tacit.legal.
Perfect. Well, Chris, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show and catching up. So from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio, wishing you lots of continued success with your career and indeed all things Tacit Legal. But from all of us, over and out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.
Exciting news, listeners. We're pleased to announce another upcoming special mini-series, Legally on the Move, Careers, Tech and Insights from Dubai. In this exclusive series, we're taking the podcast to Dubai, a city that's redefining legal careers, leading in tech innovation and setting the stage for transformative global insights. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming your way. Career stories from top legal professionals thriving in Dubai's unique legal market, the latest on AI, blockchain and how legal tech is reshaping the future of law, thought-provoking conversations on diversity, leadership and building global connections. And here's the best part. We'll be recording in some of Dubai's most iconic locations, capturing not just the insights, but some of the incredible energy of this vibrant city. So stay tuned and get ready for Legally on the Move. Trust us, you won't want to miss this journey. Over and out.
All right, Rob, collaborating in Dubai. He's on track with a podcast. Episode. Your attention rightly, hot just one of them topics so lively. You ain't gonna stop, yo. Y'all know, turn on the mic up. Here he goes. Legally speaking, we got the handle. Yeah, we engage. We ain't never talk this game. Expand. By legal going boom. Rob should explain by text and bloom. Ready. Podcasting high fidelity. Talking legal now, that's a sweet melody. Better believe it. Devising pathway. Tech hitting the bullseye, the legal tech way. Now they become the hub. Innovation they resolve. And check out the UAE as they keep evolving.